So the first time that I fell down a mountain, it was unexpected. Most falls are. I was 17 years old, and my friends and I were hiking in the Indian Peaks wilderness of Colorado. And as we reached the 13,000-foot summit, the wind picked up and the rain turned to a downpour. We scurried down that steep slope. We were chatting as water beat down our brightly colored jackets. And the rocks, of course, were wet from the rain, but we were used to such conditions because thunder and lightning and hail are all part of the adventure. But suddenly, my boot slipped on the wet scree beneath me, and I fell forward. My body picked up momentum. It was flipping several times downward and only stopping because I smacked into a boulder. And though my hip and my shoulders throbbed and my forehead was bleeding, what I felt most intensely was the shock of my own carelessness. Because I had climbed enough mountains to know the dangers of getting too comfortable. But there I was, bruised and bleeding, no longer trusting the trail beneath me. And my work in Africa and the attempt to change the world, like a mountain storm, blindsided me just when I thought I knew what I was doing. But no one tells you about the mess that comes with trying to do a good thing in the world, or maybe they do, but you stand convinced that your story is different than theirs. You see, I was 21 years old when I committed myself to a vision that included serving African villages where women and children walk more than 5 miles a day to find water to keep them alive. It included advocating for families whose immune systems were so weak from HIV that diseases in that water caused mothers to bury their babies and children to bury their parents. It has included building an organization over the last 12 years that has provided clean water for more than 1 million people in Africa. But it has also included that consistent urge to walk away. And as an American in the millennial generation, I came of age in a culture of self-actualization and instant gratification, and I was ill-prepared for the work and patience that seeking justice requires. Just when I thought I knew what I was doing, my work in Africa blindsided me with the hard truth that redeeming and restoring is a lifelong commitment. And while our American attention span has shortened to sound bites and Facebook likes, true kingdom work requires that we dig in for the long haul, give our lives and image away, and be willing to wage a long defeat on behalf of the poor. There's no better place to learn this lesson than the Marsabit Desert of northern Kenya, which is close to the border of Ethiopia. Its landscape is difficult to explain because it's a place of such extremes. It's not just hot, it's oppressively hot. And it's not just dry, it's earth-crumblingly dry. It's not just poor, it's desperately poor. And the first time I visited, we landed on a dirt airstrip, and a man named Yegon met us. And Yegon and his team were committed to bringing health and clean water to communities that had no such access. The inhabitants of this desert were a nomadic people, so they traveled for days to find remnants of vegetation for their animals to eat and to live. And one need only be in Marsabit for a day to feel this dramatic effect of a water crisis. Yegon had a vision, and he wanted us to see it. We traveled for hours across this moon-like terrain until we found ourselves in remote schools where 100 children gathered to learn among the expanse of twisters and dust. Yegon introduced us to the teachers that he had been working with on plans for rainwater catchment tanks. The vision was bold, and we were bound together in this conviction that the plans were possible to execute, and we could see real change in a place that most of the world had virtually ignored. The next year, I returned to the desert of Marsabit and traveled for hours with Yegon to witness the craftsmanship of the school's new rain catchment tanks, the newly constructed earthen dam for the animals, and this impressive engineering of deep well boreholes that were drilled successfully in one of Earth's harshest environments. The vision that Yegon had laid out for us and that we had funded had taken shape. But there was one problem that I could never have anticipated: no water. Marsabit had been suffering a severe and unexpected drought for more than a year. The water storage had run out nearly 6 months before, so mothers, fathers, babies, camels, donkeys, and goats were continuing to fight this long defeat of a life with no water, which doesn't leave much life after all. And as Americans and entrepreneurs, many of us assume that if something needs to be done, there is a way to do it. But sometimes human capability meets its threshold, and we learn the truth about what we can and cannot do. In Marsabit, we can partner with the best organization in the region. We can raise all the money we need, mobilize the communities with excellent methods, train in best practices of hygiene, build solid latrines, and construct foolproof rain tanks. But we cannot make the rain. And I hadn't considered what would happen if a project failed, or if clouds refused to shower on certain parts of the earth. So far, I had only experienced the windfall of blessing, and I suppose I expected it to stay with me. But Marsabit is this place that will make you question many truths you thought you understood about the world. How hard work pays off, how hope comes through in the end, how God is merciful. It's one thing to work fiercely toward a calling when you're seeing the fruit of your labor. But what happens when you realize that doing good is messy, more complex than you want, the problems more convoluted, and the solutions way less clear than your slogans suggest? Or when you face your own Marsabits where the rain just won't come, and we grow weary, we lose sight of the vision, and we have an urge maybe to grab onto the next new thing and to start something else because we love to feel the gratification of our goodwill and see these immediate results. In Kenya, they say, pole pole, or slowly by slowly. In Zambia, they say, panono panono, brick by brick. And they're not referring to just speed or pace, but that uneven up and down, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back nature of both work and life amidst challenging circumstances and broken relationships and deep-set cultural constraints. There's never an expectation that life will go smoothly or that you will reach your destination with expediency. Slowly by slowly expects ebb and flow. It sees healthcare happening in the midst of overwhelming sickness. It brings 10,000 liters of water, even if 100,000 are needed. Brick by brick, there are hospital wings and fresh water wells, and yet millions more women continue to walk miles for water. Slowly by slowly, we expect to wage the long defeat and seek after the new heavens in the midst of a nearly blinding brokenness. I had once thought that hope was easy because belief in the good came easily to me. And now I realize it was passion that came easily, because when I was a young adult, my passions were a gift. They propelled me forward. But at some point, the wind disappears, and hope must take over while you wait, expectant in still waters. I'm not sure I believe in as much as I used to, is what I told my longtime mentor, Steve Garber, who's with us this week. We were walking around the tidal basin in West Potomac Park in Washington, D.C., and I confessed to Steve a fountain of doubts, disappointment, and disillusionment, and I admitted my desire to quit, not just Bloodwater, but tinkering around my faith, too. And just as he has since the first time I introduced myself to him as a college student, Steve listened and pondered my questions and offered abounding wisdom. "The world is a tough place to live, Jena," he said as he squeezed his arm around my shoulder, "but there's nowhere else to live." Steve pointed to the water and the paths around it lined with cherry blossoms as if pink snow had descended. He said, "Just look at this for a moment," and the view was glorious. He said, "You know as well as I do that underneath this beauty is the stench of a sausage-making factory." And Steve was referring to his favorite quote about politics, attributed to Otto von Bismarck: "Laws are like sausages, it's better not to see them being made." And Steve has lived in Washington, D.C. for 20 years now and knew well the underbelly of our nation's dealings. He said, "But since the world is a tough place to live, we have to live with what is proximate." And I asked him what he meant by that. People have wanted to make the world a better place for thousands of years. It often seems like the world wins, and that makes it hard to keep going. "You know too much now," he said. "You know that Africa, like Washington, is more complex and more disappointing than you'd hoped it to be. And like a lot of people, you want to throw your hands in the air and give up so you can protect your heart from further wounds." That's exactly what I wanted to do. But Steve continued. He said, "The other option would be to choose to enter the world still, knowing what you know. That means believing that it is better to do something than to do nothing, and that justice somewhere is better than justice nowhere. You can choose proximate mercy for a certain group of people, even though you know that as hard as you try, you will not be able to reach all you set out to achieve in the world." Was this a defeatist manifesto, a compromise on the greater ideals? I couldn't be sure then, and I continue to wrestle with this today. Steve was the first one, though, to offer me a way to approach the world that is more realistic, more sustainable, and more responsible than the options I thought I had left. It was neither idealism nor cynicism. It was a third way. Choosing to live proximately, he said, does not mean you've lowered your standards. It means you've decided to be honest about the world and still live by hope. And true hope is always hard. It's not a passive wishing. It's an active exercise. It's a choice, an intention. And hope means giving up apathy and despair and instead embracing the uncertainty that terrifies you. It's the sacrifice of keeping your heart soft, and it's the determination to stick with it even if you may not succeed. Because why would you build a rain tank when you've lived a year under cloudless skies? Why would you teach your neighbors how to care for water when there is no water to care for? Why risk the fool by believing in a good God when the earth continues to stand dry and children die watching for rain? When I was in high school, my classmates voted me most likely to devote my life to a lost cause. And some days I take it as a compliment. But the thing about lost causes is that they're only lost if you leave them behind. And because of resistance, you may want to write them off. But if you stay in there, and if you keep hoping in action, if not in feeling, you may discover that they are not lost after all. You may discover that they are the most beautiful, extravagant examples of abundance in your life, and you may start keeping your eyes open to the causes that seem the most lost of all. And as I considered Steve's invitation to live proximately, my approach to the world and my work in it shifted. I understood the value of focusing on smaller places and particular changes. I wanted to live with the hard truth about human limitations while still believing that all of our work, even if we lose, even if it is proximate, is worth fighting for. This way of looking at the world means admitting that at some point along our vocational journey, we will not feel the rush of serving as we once did, but we will stay with it anyway. It means admitting that the world is indeed a hard place to live, and it will likely break our hearts if we keep engaging with it, but we will choose to hope anyway. It means admitting over and over, and sometimes every day, yes, the pain of this journey is real, but let us keep climbing anyway. And when you choose to keep walking in a proximate direction, you define success differently than before. And then that means there's more to celebrate. And I've learned that truer triumph comes from the small than from the grandiose. Even as a young girl, I had a hunch that the God of the universe cared about the small things as much as the big ones. I saw that the small things mattered to Jesus: a mustard seed, a few loaves of bread, 12 friends. He was not drawn to the powerful or successful, but to the meek, the humble, the oppressed. And that's where abundance flowed. I believe that we are not called to change the world. I believe that we are called to love the world. And to love the world, pole pole, slowly by slowly, we are the ones who must change. Thank you.